A renowned architect by profession and a collector of a beautiful collection of Thanjavur and Mysore paintings by interest. We are talking to Mr. Kuldip Singh. Can you please start with something about your initial exposure, your occupations then, and how you started your journey as a collector of such a huge collection of Thanjavur and Mysore paintings?
Well, as you said yourself, I'm an architect by profession, also a town planner, and the story of collection of Mysore and Thanjavur paintings really starts in, say, early 70s when I had occasions to travel to South India in connection with my professional work. And there I was quite intrigued to see a whole lot of fragments of buildings being displayed in the bazaars. Very beautiful doors, very well carved doors, all kinds of artifacts taken out of old buildings. And I was intrigued by them. I bought a few of them. In fact, I bought a whole lot of doors at one time, very beautiful ones. And bit by bit, these antique dealers started to show me Thanjavur and Mysore paintings, which were popular at that time, but not very much so. I mean, they wanted to sell these paintings. I found them initially to be somewhat gaudy because, in my mind, the benchmark were um, the miniatures of North India, Pahadi, Guler, and all that, which are as far away from these paintings as any work of art can be. But then it so happened once I had to pick up two paintings to bring them to Delhi to show them to somebody. And that person didn't seem to like those paintings. But I thought then I would return them to the dealers, and I left them in my office. And for about 3 weeks, my I would travel over those paintings here and there, and somehow something happened. I think the painting grew on me. That when I went back to Chennai, I forgot to take them back with me. And I then asked the dealer there, I said, "Do you have more of those paintings?" And there he showed me about 10, 12 other paintings, and I couldn't help buying one or two of them and then talking about it. And then it became a bit of an obsession to look at these paintings, that whenever I had spare time from my assignments, mind you, I had a lot of architectural assignments and planning assignments in Cochin and Chennai. And whenever I had a little spare time, I liked to spend that with the dealers or in the museum looking at these paintings. And bit by bit, it began to grow on me. And bit by bit, I began to acquire them. That is the sum total how it happened. And then it went on and on.
As you've also carried out quite an extensive research on these beautiful pieces of art, can you also tell us if you've encountered any of the artist family associated with these painting traditions or your interactions, your memories with them?
Well, at one time, myself and Dr. Nanjot Lahiri, who was a historian, she traveled with me to Chennai and to some of the uh, smaller towns around Chennai to interview some of the artists. And at that time, we did collect some material and we talked to a lot of traditional artists who were able to tell us how the differences have now arisen between what their grandfathers and great grandfathers were doing and what they were doing now. Essence of the whole thing is that, historically speaking, painters in the later part of 19th century used to travel, that is artists, used to travel from village to village looking for patronage, and then would settle down for a while in one of the villages where some patronage was offered. They would make those paintings uh, to the requirements or specifications of the patrons, be paid very small sums of money, which would be supplemented by a place to stay and adequate quantities of food for them to survive on. And then after a while, they would move on to the next assignment to another village. Well, to that extent, I can talk about the traditional painters as we found them in the mid 70s. Later on, now, I've had the occasion to talk to a number of traditional painters, but the attitude, as the materials with which they work, the subjects that they handle, the prices of the paintings, they have all radically changed. And the new genre of Thanjavur painting, which is emerging now, is a subject by itself.
Can you tell us something more about the patronage of these paintings then when these this kind of tradition started? Like,
Well, there are two dimensions of it. According to the historical literature available, the painting's roots lie most probably in Andhra. And it is from there that at one time the Deccanese artists, on account of difficult times prevailing in those areas, migrated towards Tamil Nadu and Mysore, and they received patronage from the Mummadi Krishnaraj Vodya in Mysore and the Thanjavur ruling family, the Sabuji in particular, gave them patronage to practice their art, and that's how this whole thing took a new shape altogether and are now known as Thanjavur paintings because of their association with the Sabuji's ruling clan.
so, sir, does this patronage like transformed over a period of time?
That's right.
In terms of maybe what we can see, the material which is used in these paintings, the precious and semi-precious stones, and does it also reflect in the kind of patronage they were having, the artist was having?
Yes, certainly. You see, the royal patronage was more towards portraiture and more towards depicting the court scenes and similar other matters related to the affairs of the state. But there were other dimensions of patronage, particularly the bhajan mats, that is, the religious institutions attached to some temples, and also in the other direction, some huge bhajan mats having their own temples, who started to commission these painters to do religious paintings, which are known as icons. Now, I call them religious paintings because a lot of them are iconic in a way, but not true icons, in the same sense that when you enter a temple, the icon is the presiding deity of the temple which you worship. But the walls of the temples have got enormous, beautiful sculptures all over. But normally they are not worshipped, but they tell the mythological stories and bring and create a atmosphere of sanctity for the icon to be viewed as a very exclusive and rare object. So, patronage of bhajan mats. The third thing is, as the paintings, as the painters kept on making these paintings, the common man also got interested. And in the later part, artists started to make uh, copies of, artists themselves made copies of their paintings which were popular. For instance, the Krishna theme and the Ram Patta Abhishek, that is the coronation of Rama, very popular subjects. And then they would make, say, half a dozen or a dozen copies of each one of them, take them to the melas around the temples, and where they would sell them to the worshippers who came there. So this uh, formed a important part of the common man's homes also.
Coming on to the thematic representation which you were just talking about, uh, what is your take on the textual or oral traditions that fed these paintings in form of thematic representation?
Well, now put it this way, that these paintings are deeply religious. And although the later day scholars have tried to bring out the Western or westernized influence on these paintings, but in my opinion, that is way minimal. In reality, the inspiration for these paintings lies in uh, the stories, mythological stories, in the Puranas, uh, in the uh, Ramayana and Mahabharata very much, and also uh, particularly Thanjavur paintings inspired by the Kritis, uh, the uh, bhajans written by their famous musicians, which were very popular, and they all form part of the body of inspiration which helped these artists to bring out these themes in a visually striking manner.
Sir, how do you see these painting traditions as icons from temples to houses, which were earlier used to get formally established in the temples with proper rituals and ceremonies, that is, thapana rituals, of the murti by invoking the deity into it, now came to the houses in form of these paintings?
Yes, this is very important, and this is a subject by itself because as more and more these paintings were made, uh, the patronage also increased, and they became more or less an integral part of the puja rooms of the well-to-do. Although the actual puja would be carried out to the small murti already established there, but like the temples itself, these paintings formed a very important background to create an aura, an atmosphere of sanctity in the temple, and they were always treated with great respect, garlanded and tilak given, and even a bit of prasad put in front of the painting and treated with great respect. Now, it is on account of that tradition that later periods in the earlier part of 20th century, the so-called calendar art has developed. The inspiration is that although the popularity of the calendar art is attributed to the efforts of artist Ravi Verma for popularizing these prints, but the inspiration lies earlier. Popularity began earlier. Only thing is because the themes began to be made available for a very little price, the common man began to install them in their homes. Even if they don't have a puja room, they hang one or two calendars and treat that as an object of worship. They truly feel that there is a communication between the pictorial representation on the paper and their hearts, and treat these things with great respect. So the paintings at that time in the puja rooms were by and large not subjected to the rituals of sthapana. But then the later developments suggest that for the masses, sthapana is not as important. You see, some of the ritualistic aspects of the deity, which is fixed in the temple, some of those aspects, rituals, have been, shall we say, softened by the use of paintings and calendars for worship. Now, for instance, calendars or even paintings are not subjected to a sthapana, but they're treated with equal respect. Not only that, the paintings cannot be destroyed without putting them through some sort of a ritual of visarjan. You see, so that much respect is granted to these paintings. Thanjavur paintings moved from the sacred areas and temples into the homes, into the puja rooms. But lately, the Thanjavur paintings have become very popular, and they have come out of the puja rooms and become a part of the drawing rooms. So while the modern art, Indian modern art, which pretends or which leans towards religious aspects, has always remained in the art gallery and the drawing room and has never entered the puja room. These paintings, which were exclusively meant for the puja rooms, have now a tendency to come back, not come, but emerge into the drawing rooms. I see this kind of a churning taking place in the society, which will tend to change the character of the Thanjavur paintings and bring them out of the repetitive mode into something a little more creative.
Coming back to collecting, how has your passion grown over the years?
Well, it has, I would say, grown and grown in the sense that I found a whole lot of missing links in the uh, story of the Thanjavur painting, which I thought needed to be explored and looked into. One of them has been the dating of these paintings. Paintings are popular, paintings have been written about. Jaya Paswami did an excellent job, although she didn't have enough material. But over the years, enough material has come forward. But actual research has faltered. Nobody has done it. So I thought I would get into the dating of these paintings. Secondly, I have realized the importance of this subject now, that this was a unique phase in the development of visual art in South India, particularly painting, and that the paintings are very fragile and subject to deterioration very rapidly on account of uh, the number of materials used, the diversity of materials used in the making of the paintings, which all react differently in to changes in temperature and moisture, and these paintings deteriorate very easily and very rapidly. Now, realizing these things, um, I put my whole collection through a conservation protocol, and secondly, in the process of doing the conservation work, we stumbled on some dates, and we then worked out a protocol for dating the paintings. And I'm glad to say that the excellent work done by the conservators, we were able to date about 100 paintings now. I hope this kind of research goes on into the paintings, and I intend to preserve the collection that I have rather than to let it be dissipated.
Sir, as you have been a collector, as you said, how do you think government policies affect art collection or can affect collecting art?
Well, the government has no policy, and you can say two things about it, that on things like this Thanjavur painting subject, for which the government has possibly no great respect, is possibly a good thing, because we can do our work without any interference. One. Secondly, I'm very sorry that we have an Antiquity Act which has not been revisited for, shall we say, uh, 45 years now, and the circumstances have changed. And the adverse effects of that Antiquity Act have been noted. The Antiquity Act was framed to preserve and to conserve historical artifacts within the country, which I think is a laudable objective and should be pursued, no doubt about it. But its effect has been totally adverse. That is, the archaeological department and the busybodies in it started to chase collectors irrespective of whether they were doing anything wrong or not, and began to make life difficult for them. Consequently, a whole lot of collectors gave up. Not only that, a whole lot of dealers also stopped dealing in these subjects, with the result that the shall we say, amount of money which should have gone into preserving this art got diverted into modern art. So I hope the government reframes its policy and makes it collector friendly so that more and more collectors can come forward and build up collections on various aspects of our history, which will help to bring an appropriate historical perspective to our past.